This episode of Please Explain is sponsored by Aware Super, helping you get more from your future. From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Wednesday, July 19th. The cost of living crisis has been crushing countless Australians, emotionally and financially, for more than a year now. Nearly every day, we read stories about the social avalanche that's been set off by this crisis, and how the staggeringly high cost of petrol, groceries, and rent is leading many young Australians to take insecure employment instead of further study.
Search for a rental is being likened to drawing blood from a stone this morning. New data revealing a quarter of Sydney's population is struggling to find a place to live.
About those now putting off having children or becoming homeless, thanks in part to a dozen interest rate rises over just over a year.
A number of Victorians are now having their gas and electricity cut off as they struggle to pay for their power bills.
But now we've got a new incoming governor of the Reserve Bank of Australia.
Michelle Bullock will be the first woman to lead the RBA in its 63-year history. And her appointment.
And many are pinning their hopes that these stresses might soon ease once Michelle Bullock leads our economy.
Michelle's will be an important job at an important time with the challenges that we face globally.
Today, senior economics correspondent Shane Wright on what a new governor might mean for our stress levels and our ability to put food on our tables. So Shane, Michelle Bullock will take over as the new Reserve Bank of Australia governor on September 18th. This was announced last week. And since then, before she's even started her job, she's already copped criticism for remarks that she once made that more workers will have to lose their jobs before the economy becomes more sustainable. So can you tell me about what she said about this need for rising unemployment and what sort of backlash she copped?
Oh, look, it's great that you've dived into the depths of the weeds that are central banking and monetary policy setting, and we're straight into a concept which is the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, the NAIRU, which is a concept that there's a point at which if you take the unemployment rate low enough, it will force up inflation.
The Reserve Bank Deputy Governor Michelle Bullock yesterday said that these interest rate rises are designed to cool the economy, slow employment growth and ultimately push up the unemployment rate to try and tame inflation. She says.
So she is talking this orthodoxy concept that if unemployment gets really low, it'll feed through into higher wages and into inflation.
She says unemployment will need to rise from about 3.5% to 4.5%. That's the equivalent of about 140,000 fewer jobs over the next 18 months. And so,
they're using interest rates at the moment to sort of wind back how much we spend. Now, if you reduce spending in the economy, businesses aren't selling as much stuff, not as many widgets, not as many trips to a holiday or many soy latte coffees, then that means the economy slows down, which means businesses don't need as many staff. So when she talks about we think unemployment's going to go up, it's because they've pushed up interest rates 4 full percentage points in 14 months. That has a major macroeconomic impact, which will then mean businesses will start shedding staff or not bringing on as many staff as they have been. Hence, you get to a higher unemployment rate.
Okay, but understandably, the Australian Council of Trade Unions Secretary had something to say about this. So can you tell us about the response?
Yeah, and this is why it's so contentious, because unemployment is at 3.6%. It's been floating around 3.4, 3.5, 3.6 for almost the last 12 months. And as Phil Lowe, the current governor of the bank, says, that's been the biggest success story of the bank in the last 40 years or almost 50 years. We haven't had an unemployment rate at that low. Now, the bank's job is keeping inflation between 2 and 3%. It hasn't got inflation between 2 and 3%. It's a long way short of that at the moment. So that's the tension.
Yep, the unions have come out and slammed the Reserve Bank, said they're out of touch. They want to aim for a lower full employment rate than the Reserve Bank.
Sally McManus and the ACTU and anyone who has a job thinks, hold on, I pretty much like having a job, especially one where there's been a pickup in wages growth over the last 12 months. So they're saying, hold on, hold your horses, RBA. You've actually achieved something really great for millions of people. Don't throw it out chasing efforts to drag down inflation, which may be being pushed up by factors beyond the bank's own control.
And is there anything more that lay people should know about this link between unemployment and getting inflation under control? Because for many of us, it seems counterintuitive. We think, oh, well, lowest unemployment possible. That's what we want, right?
And that's what the bank wants. Like, too many people saying that's not what the bank wants. They do. And this is why setting monetary policy or setting interest rates and running the economy is extremely difficult, because there are trade-offs everywhere. Now, the bank's just gone through a review, the first independent review since 1980. That review actually criticises the bank, saying the bank's actually a little bit too fixated on the link between inflation and wages. Like, that's a real 1970s idea, given how wage setting in this country and around the world is much, much different to how it was in the 1970s. Inflation can be driven by other factors. And so you've seen the arguments which have been mirrored by the OECD and the IMF, the European Central Bank, that profiteering by certain sectors of the economy is adding to inflation. There's the inflationary impact of what went on through COVID, particularly around supply chains. So there's all these other issues. The RBA's guiding light that it's had for the last 40 years that is coming under challenge.
Yeah, right, okay. You wrote that actually Michelle Bullock could be cutting interest rates within 12 months to kickstart the economy and actually prevent a sharp jump in unemployment as she prepares to undertake this massive overhaul of the RBA. And you've written this based on what senior economists have told you. So what have they said, and what will we likely expect to see regarding interest rate rises over the next year? I mean, just how much relief, I guess, can we reasonably expect to see?
Yeah, so financial markets are painting a picture of, right, maybe another quarter percentage point cut. But there are some economists saying maybe 2, maybe 3 cuts. So the general theory is there's 1, maybe 2 more rate rises this year, and they will be by September or October. The best evidence of that is what's actually going on in the United States right at the moment, where inflation is coming down much quicker than many economists and market participants had been expecting. Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve in the United States, may actually deliver a soft landing, which is inflation back towards its target with a really low unemployment rate. And that would be an absolute genius achievement for the Fed. Michelle Bullock may be in the same space where you get to the second half of next year, the economy has really slowed, but because the way the economy has changed since COVID, there's still unemployment may not have risen all that much. We may be just over 4. And she's going, right, we can afford to cut interest rates because of what that means for businesses and for people who might have a mortgage. We might be able to give them some relief. So you can absolutely see that as one course of how the economy plays out over the next 12 to 18 months.
I guess this brings us to a question that many of us would love an answer to, which is just who is Michelle Bullock? Because her appointment is obviously a milestone event. She's the first woman ever in the 63-year history of the RBA to hold the top job. And she'll be taking over from Philip Lowe, who, as most of us know, is finishing up a 7-year stint as governor. He's obviously copped a lot of criticism, particularly because of the 12 interest rate rises that he brought in over the last 14 months. So can you give us a picture of just who is this new person in this top job?
So Michelle Bullock, born in Melbourne, moves to the New England town of Armidale, university town, when she's about 9. Country woman who ended up doing an economics degree at the University of New England up in Armidale. Absolutely star student. And she's picked up by the RBA in the early 1980s. And that is where she has been since the early 1980s. She did her master's at the London School of Economics. But apart from that, a lifer at the RBA. So Michelle Bullock comes to the bank. She's recognised fairly quickly as being very bright. So she's moved through the various parts of the bank on this track to get into the executive. And now this is where it gets extremely interesting. We go back 2 years. Michelle Bullock is Financial Services Assistant Governor. She's really responsible for the payment system. So apart from setting interest rates, the bank actually runs the payment system. Now people go, what are you talking about? I said, the payment system is how we pay for everything. Now, if something goes wrong in the payment system, we are living in caves with canned goods. Like the economy comes to a stop, and you can see it anytime there's, say, an outage through a commercial bank's ATM system. Think of the payment system as akin to what would happen if the electricity system broke down or the sewage and water system broke down. It's that instrumental plumbing for the entire economy. And this is what happened during the global financial crisis. The financial system broke down, and that led to hundreds of thousands of people losing their job, that sort of thing. The deputy governor at that time is a chap by the name of Guy Debelle. Now, the deputy inside the bank is always seen as the successor to the governor. Guy Debelle decides, I'm going to take a new job. So this opens up this position, this really important position, and Josh Frydenberg decides Michelle. And then you have the Reserve Bank review. And the Reserve Bank review says, look, the bank is too insular. It needs major change. Like, we are talking the biggest changes that the bank has had since it was created in 1960 out of the Commonwealth Bank. And so Michelle Bullock apparently has explained her thoughts, saying, I'm all in for changes. Here are some proposals I think we can go through to the review panel. And some of those have been picked up by the review and their recommendations. So you finally get to this point where Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, decides, right, we think we can go with Michelle Bullock to drive what, like, it may not be obvious from the outside, but the changes that are envisaged for the bank will have an impact on every Australian over the next 10 to 20 years.
So can you tell us a bit about that? Because I know you've written about these changes that we're supposed to see coming at the RBA. Can you, I guess, run us through a little bit, what those proposed changes are and how that will actually impact our lives day to day? Yeah.
The main game is getting much more advice that can challenge the governor and the executive of the bank. So a special committee, like interest rates aren't going to be set by the board. They're going to be set by a committee of people who've got specialist skills in understanding what's going on in the economy. So the board that we have now was actually an idea that was first proposed by Jim Scullins, Treasurer, during the Great Depression. The Reserve Bank Board, as it is the only one of its kind in the world, whereby we pick outsiders, non-monetary policy experts to set interest rates. These non-monetary policy experts, business leaders, worked for a while, but as the world's got more difficult, the shortcomings in that have become obvious and are obvious in the review's finding. So we have specialist board, a lot more advice. They will meet for 2 days. There'll be press conferences from the governor. And so the first Reserve Bank press conference was given by Phil Lowe during COVID. And he had about 4 or 5 as governor. But his peers overseas actually front up after every meeting and go, right, this is what we're thinking. The communication aspect. Then there are the internal ways of thinking, how they target inflation, whereabouts inflation needs to be. That is in flux as well. And just the culture within the bank itself, being a bit more open, listening to not quite what ordinary people think, but a broader range of voices both here and overseas, so they make the best possible decision.
Right, okay, so you've mentioned there a few really sort of concrete changes that might really change how the RBA actually operates. But what can you tell us about Michelle Bullock's tenure at the RBA? She's been there 38 years, I believe it is. So what does her behaviour over those 38 years in the roles that she's held tell us about what sort of governor she will likely be? And what will that mean for the rest of us, our ability to get and keep jobs, afford to live? Because you've previously said on Please Explain that the governor of the Reserve Bank is, while usually unknown to most Australians, actually central to our lives, that just as the Prime Minister is the head of the government, the RBA governor is like the Prime Minister of the economy. So can you tell us a bit about her and what she might likely do for us?
Internally, she's very well respected by the staff. And Phil Lowe has lost some of the staff, and this was pre-COVID as well. And if you read the review, there was a lot of problems, the staff, especially lower down in the bank, not real happy where the executive of the bank was headed. So that's one aspect. When she takes over formally, she will still be the guiding light of where the bank goes on interest rates, but she may be at a point that they don't have to lift rates anymore. Interest rates take 12 to 24 months to really work their way through an economy. So the first rate increase was in May last year. That one has just had its full impact, and we're in July this year. And there's a lot more that still has to steam through the economy. So that's why there's a lot of economists and even the RBA saying, right, second half of this year, the economy is probably going to face its rockiest period, and then with an improvement next year and into 2025. And as the Prime Minister of the economy, that's one of her jobs, is to try to explain how the economy is going to pan out. So she's always looking to the future, where inflation will be, where unemployment will be, where growth will be, those sorts of things. So that's how instrumental she'll be to all of us over her 7 years as governor.
Thank you so much, Shane, for joining us.
Thanks, Sam.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Julia Carr-Katzel, with technical assistance from Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.
This episode of Please Explain was brought to you by Aware Super. With super advice and super returns, Aware Super is super helpful. For more information about Aware Super, including their PDS and TMD, visit aware.com.au.